Indicator 13 training. It's very exciting that we have this many folks joining us. This is important work, and I really want to get into. I want you to be able to walk away from this training and really have a good handle on what you need to do to create compliant transition plans, compliant with Indicator 13. So just real quick, my name is John Spinney. I work at the Agency of Education. I've been there 15 years. I grew up in a fairly large family. My two youngest brothers both have Down syndrome and were adopted as infants. Both of my parents worked in the education world. I'm actually the legal guardian now for my two youngest brothers, and they are 37 and 39 now. And I grew up in a world of equity and inclusion were always things that were on the minds of both of my parents, and how my brothers were raised. And then seeing how my brothers transitioned to life after high school and then start to receive services from developmental services, it only showcased how important transition planning is, especially for the kids that are not eligible for a higher level of service. So my brothers were really taken care of, like in a way, like they were covered by the Howard Center, who has always done an amazing job with them. But where I'm going with this is that as for those kids on your caseloads that are going to be eligible for developmental services, they're going to be really looked after in a good. And I'm not saying you have to do it's any less difficult, but they're going to have access to supported employment and community integration services. However, your students that might be identified as having an emotional disturbance, or maybe is on the autism spectrum and is not quite at the level of meeting eligibility for developmental services, those are the kids that can potentially slip through the cracks. And this is why transition planning is so important. Transition planning in special education. You're helping them level the playing field. And for those kids that aren't going to meet eligibility for that higher level of service, this work is important work. And as a state, it has been determined by the feds that we have not really been doing a great job with this. And in my view, it really comes down to the documentation, because I've seen a lot of the work that happens around the state, and people are doing great work. It's just that the documentation isn't always correct and compliant with Indicator 13. So what I'm gonna share my screen, and you should be looking now at the 8 elements of Indicator 13. So there's 17 indicators that every state has to report out on how we're doing to the feds. Okay. Every single transition plan in the IEP needs to meet all 8 of these items. Okay. Every single transition plan that you write should flow through all 8 of these things. Okay. So the first one, and what we're going to, just to back up actually, so a quick overview of what we're going to do today. I'm going to talk about the key elements of Indicator 13. I'm not going to go right into the PowerPoint like we traditionally do. It's going to be a little bit different. We're going to do the PowerPoint a little bit later. What we're going to do after we go through these elements is I'm going to show you how to find the secondary transition resource page of the Vermont AOE website. And then I'm going to show you where the case study project is. And then you're going to have a 10-minute assignment to read through Jody's case study and look at her transition plan. And then we're going to come back and then we're going to pull up what is new. So we do have new information. We have a completely new revamped Vermont transition plan form, which has embedded technical assistance in it. And after that, we are going to then go through the full PowerPoint. Then we're going to get into the Indicator 13 suite of tools. And then we'll get into some questions and discussion. Okay. So just real quick on Indicator 13, and I know there's probably about 20% of you on the initial survey that said you're not familiar with Indicator 13. So I just wanted to quickly point out what it is. The percent of youth age 16 and above, or earlier if appropriate, with an IEP that includes coordinated, measurable annual IEP goals and transition services that will reasonably enable the student to meet the post-secondary goals. Okay? Basically, the main thing that you guys need to know are these 8 things. Okay? If your transition plan has evidence that the student was invited to the IEP meeting that is discussing transition, boom, you've covered number 1. Now, these eight elements are tied into a checklist, and I'm going to show you where to find that. And we have I created a special 1-page simple checklist for all the special educators here that you should print out and just kind of have as your reference item, and it's your way of checking yourself. Okay, so every single transition plan, there should be evidence that the student was invited. There should be evidence of invitation to other agencies like Voc Rehab or Developmental Services, Department of Labor, VZAC, DCF maybe. There should be, and let me just back up. Regarding the invitation to outside agencies, this is one of the most important parts of this because, again, just like I was saying with our students that can slip through the cracks, when they graduate, we know that students who are receiving special education services, once they graduate and exit, okay, and I'm not talking about the continuing for a year or two to focus on transition. I'm talking that point when they actually graduate and exit. If they are not an open case with Voc Rehab, it makes it a lot harder for that student and that family to be making progress either towards higher ed or employment. By spending the time to pull in the transition counselor with Voc Rehab, once they graduate, they sort of leave the hands of you, right? The services that you're providing as a special educator, the services that your school is providing to the student. Once they graduate, those services are done. Their entitlements to special education are over. However, if they were made to be an open case with Voc Rehab during that transition phase, Voc Rehab does not stop at that point. They will carry on and be looking after your student. It's one of the best ways you can help your kids. Okay? And the other thing is, some people think that, just because Voc Rehab is involved, that they're going to be doing, that they're all of a sudden the lead now. They're not the lead. Education is the lead while that student is still in school. Okay? So in terms of providing a free and appropriate public education, the LEA is really on the hook to be providing those services. We want VR pulled in so that when that student graduates, they have that in place. Okay? The third thing that every single transition plan needs to have is that there was age-appropriate transition assessments used to create the plan. Okay? We're going to get into each of these with more detail. The fourth thing is that there needs to be measurable post-secondary goals. And the goals, these are a little bit different than what you might be used to in your annual section of the IEP. They're outcomes. And they're written and take place after graduation. Then each one of those post-secondary goals. So the post-secondary goals are they cover 3 domains: education and training, employment, and independent living, where appropriate. So the IEP team can decide if independent living, if it's appropriate or needed. And we'll get a little more into that. The next section is that there needs to be annual IEP goals. Each post-secondary goal should have an annual IEP goal attached to it, or maybe more than one goal. The next thing is that the post-secondary goals need to be updated annually. There needs to be transition services. By the way, this is not necessarily services that are going to be of any additional cost. It might be things that are already embedded in the services that your school is providing. It's a case by case. All of this is sort of case by case in terms of, for example, one set of transition assessments might be perfectly the right fit for one kid, but not right for another kid. One set of transition services might be perfect for one kid, but not right for another kid. So those are all individually determined by the IEP team. Lastly, there needs to be a course of study. Okay. And what that is essentially a list from the current school year to the anticipated exit graduation year. It's a list of the primary courses that are most relevant to that student achieving their post-secondary goals. Okay. So where we're going to go now is good old Google. Okay. Because I want to show you how to find this stuff. And this is just the easiest way that I think to get there. And honestly, I do it this way a lot too. So you're going to Google Vermont Special Education. Even if you don't spell it right, it'll get you there, right? Okay. So you're going to pull up Vermont Special Education. And by the way, folks, I would like you right now to go ahead and do this. Follow what I'm doing right now. Pull up Google Vermont AOE. Get yourself to this page, because this is related to the task that you guys are about to do. You're going to click Resources for Special Educators. You're going to scroll down to Secondary Transition. Finally, everything that I want on here is here. I don't know, for those of you that have been around, remember that we used to do the transition learning community, the wiki, back in the day, old school. Everything that was of use that was on there is on here, is up on our AOE website. And there's a lot of things on here that have been added. There's a lot of work that I did over the summer on this. Okay, and we are going to do more of a resource walk, if you will, later on. But what we're going to do right now is get into the case study project. So I want you to scroll way down the Vermont AOE case study project. Okay, you're going to click that. There are 6 fictional students in here. We're going to be focused on Jody today, because Jody has a transition plan on the old form, and she has a transition plan on the new form. And that's a big focus of today that we're going to showcase. I want you to see the difference and see what's new, and we're going to get to that. However, the first bit of work that you're going to do right now is you're going to click Jody. Okay. You're going to open up Jody, and I want you to read page, and I'm going to put this in the chat as well. If you miss it, I want you to read page 1 through 5 and also page 18 to 23. Page 18 to 23 is her transition plan. So page 1 through 5 is sort of her story, and also her personalized learning plan, which is general ed. And of course, informs the transition plan. And then we're gonna come back in 10 minutes. Okay, so it's 10:22. Go ahead and read page 1 through 5 and page 18 through 23. And then at 10:33, sorry, 10:30, let's start it right now, 10:23. And at 10:33, we're gonna come back. Okay? I'm gonna post a link to the Jody's document right in the chat as well. Okay. Talk to you at 10:33. Go ahead and mute yourself, folks, whoever that was. Thanks. ahead and mute yourself. Okay, folks, welcome back. I'd like to draw your attention to Jody's old transition plan. So this is on the old form, and after this, we're going to go into the new form. But I just want to walk you through so that you can see what is different. So the first thing I want to draw your attention to is element number 1, evidence of inviting the student. And element number 2, evidence of inviting outside agencies. Okay, so right here, Jody and her mother and a representative from VR were all in attendance. Okay. The transition assessments, summary evaluations of service providers, including vocational and daily living scales, the WACE, interest inventories, person-centered futures planning interview, parent and student personal transition surveys, and the supports intensity scale. The results of these assessments show that Jody is capable of meeting the goals and benchmarks outlined in this plan. Now, one thing that we had a problem with the old form is that there wasn't an easy way to list the dates, and so the date should be on this actually, and it's not. The new template has a much more organized way of listing the dates for the assessments. Okay, I'm going to scroll down to the post-secondary goals. Okay. And I saw that there was some questions in the chat about post-secondary goals. We're going to get into the rationale for why those are written as outcomes once we get into the PowerPoint. So education and training is a required domain. The post-secondary goal for Jody is immediately after graduation, Jody will complete a preparatory course at the community college and obtain the work key certificate. Okay, so that's the overarching post-secondary goal that is going to occur after graduation. Okay, special educators are not on the hook for what happens after graduation. However, you still need to create a post-secondary goal so that you have the guidepost for what the student is hoping to achieve. Okay, and it is based on, these goals are all based on the assessments. What the special educator is on the hook for are these annual transition goals. Okay. The annual transition goals are what you're working on with that student for that year. Okay. And those are the things that are going to be updated and revamped, new goals each year. Whereas the post-secondary goals, you know, the team will review those, but if it's still what that student hopes to achieve and do after graduation, then and if it's still relevant, then you can leave it, or you might need to refine it a little. But the annual transition goals are what need to be worked on throughout the year. Okay, so someone is not muted. If you could mute yourself, that would be great. Okay, the employment post-secondary goal for Jody. After obtaining her work key certificate, she will obtain and maintain a full-time position in a retail setting for competitive pay. And then the corresponding annual goal is that when she's working at her job or at school, Jody will practice greeting people and or answering questions and then returning to work without prompting to stop talking or continue working 100% of the time for 2 weeks in a row. And then there's transition services, school-based, and then community-based job coaching as necessary. Keep in mind, this is the old form. I'm just wanting to kind of cue us up here so that you can sort of make the distinction between the two forms. Independent living. Within 10 years of graduation, Jody will live alone or with a roommate independently without live-in monitors in a supported living house or apartment. And then the annual goals: in home economics, consumer math, and in community-based instruction, Jody will determine the unit price of items to choose the better buy independently in 4 out of 5 tries, 5 times in a row. And then she has a second annual goal as well. And then she has transition services. And she has her course of study. Okay. So now I want to bring your attention back to the secondary transition section of the Vermont AOE website. And where we're going to go is we're going to scroll down to the new Indicator 13 suite of tools. Somebody cue up some kind of sound or music. Just kidding. Okay. So here we have the new, this is the blank template. So this is, you're going to start to see this in DocuSped. Richard Smith has been working on that, and we should be getting that into GoView. That's the blank template. However, we're going to be looking at Jody again on the new form. Just pausing for a sec here. I'm just checking some of the questions here. Let's see here. Okay, I just minimized my little box there, folks. But now I don't know how to get it back. Actually, there it is. Okay. All right. So the big change that we have this year with this new form is that we wanted to embed the technical assistance. We also wanted to reference which element of indicator 13 we were referring to, and then which regulation is relevant. So Jody, she was invited to the meeting in person as well as via a letter sent home. Jody's mother was invited and attended as well. Okay, so the student invitation is now its own section. This next part is all new. Okay, so the outside agencies, the element 2. Okay, and the section that's in italics that's actually in the template, and it's the embedded guidance. Outside agencies such as VR can continue to support the student after they graduate with regard to employment or post-secondary education. However, they must be enrolled in VR. If not already enrolled in VR services by grade 12, the student should enroll in order to receive continuing supports related to employment and post-secondary ed. It is critical that these key connections are made prior to graduation by inviting the proper outside agencies to the IEP meeting that addresses the transition plan. Examples of other agencies who the IEP team may choose to invite include Vermont Developmental Disabilities Services, Department for Children and Families, Department of Labor, Vermont Student Assistance Corporation. Okay, so in Jody's case, the transition counselor was invited on April 15th and attended the meeting. Okay, so there's also another new section here that some of you may remember was kind of hidden in the back of the old transition plan. We've moved it up to the forefront, and it says describe the coordinated interagency linkages and responsibilities, including pre-employment transition services. And that's services provided or paid for from another agency. VR will provide progressive education opportunities for Jody to explore post-secondary options. Also, VR will assist in tracking down any assistive technology needs. Just keep in mind that occasionally, as I've been, over the years reviewing transition plans, sometimes it's almost as though the special educator kind of thinks that VR is the lead now. And that's really not the case. Education is the lead while the student is still enrolled in high school. Okay. All right, the next section, we're down to element 3 on the new form. And again, we have the italics, which is the embedded guidance. Transition assessments are an ongoing process of collecting data on the individual's strengths, needs, preferences, and interests as they relate to the demands of current and future working, educational, living, and personal and social environments. Assessment data serve as the common thread in the transition process and form the basis for defining goals and services to be included in the IEP. There's also a link to the page of the website that I was just referring to, where the secondary transition section. So this is a really important area, the assessment section, and sometimes our special ed monitors, or sometimes I'll see it as well if I'm, as I'm reviewing the IEPs, and we might see an IEP that just says the student is going to take XYZ assessments. Okay. So that's kind of a red flag, because the transition plan should be already a finished product. It should be showcasing what assessments the special educator used and drew from to create the goals. So if there's no assessments done, but yet there's goals, it's not going to be as robust of a transition plan, and it's not going to be compliant. So if there's no assessments, it's not going to pass indicator 13. And for those of you that are new to indicator 13, and we're going to go through the checklist. The checklist is really to be checking yourself with the transition plan. If any one of these elements is not in place, it ends up being non-compliant with indicator 13. And so over the years, we do have pockets of the state. We have lots of special educators who do know this, but then we have a lot of special educators who are new to it. And then, but even sometimes with the special educators that know it, there might be one thing that gets left out. And remember, if even one thing gets left out, the whole thing ends up being non-compliant. So then in terms of our data, it looks not great for us, okay? And honestly, I want us to become the best state in the country for this, and there's no reason we can't. We're a small state, and we're in this together, and I think you guys are already doing great work with your students. It's just making sure that that's getting translated into the transition plan of the IEP. Okay, so the assessment section, this is all new. Okay, what I did was I actually looked at what other states who have really good indicator 13 outcome data, I looked at their IEP forms, and I actually I took our old transition plan, I took what these states that are doing great work, or at least with the data and the documentation, and I kind of drew from them, and it's all along this theme of the embedded technical assistance. So now we have all of the transition assessments that Jody did. And then we have a summary of what was the, sort of the main information that was gleaned from those assessments. Okay, so Jody had all these different assessments. It shows the date, and then it shows the summary of results. Now, each year, as you're using the new forms, just make this a running list. You don't need to delete these out, from the prior year. Just keep that going as a running list, okay? Again, we're still in the assessment section, and this is a whole nother new area. And again, you're starting to get the theme that transition assessments are very important, and it's really the underpinning of a good transition plan, because if as a team if you're not drilling into the students' strengths, needs, preferences, and interests, then there's going to be a higher likelihood that there's not going to be good student buy-in, right? And you might just not get enough out of the plan with that student. So the assessments are arguably, in terms of the creation of the plan, it's probably the most important part. And then the next most important part, I would say, is really making sure that the outside agencies are tied in and pulled in, especially Voc Rehab. Keep in mind, by the way, that if Voc Rehab is not able to attend, so if you invite them and you're doing your best due diligence to invite them, you just have to show evidence of that in terms of the documentation. You're still going to have a compliant transition plan if it says Voc Rehab was invited but is not able to attend this year. They will start attending next year. Something like that. If that's what Voc Rehab says to you, that's fine. You're not on the hook. You're not going to get dinged if VR can't come. They have to triage. They're really busy too, just like you guys are. So they are going to triage the students that are closer to graduation. Okay. But just so wrapping up this assessment section, so each of these strengths of the student as indicated by formal or informal transition assessments, Jody has strong social skills and can be independent. Needs of the student as indicated by the assessments. Jody needs additional mentoring and coaching around how much social interaction with customers is appropriate while at work. Preferences of the student. Jody prefers the aspects of her job that allows for social interaction. Interests. Jody wants to work in retail and would like to work for a store in the mall that sells clothes, and we have a typo. So you see how the whole assessment section just sort of frames everything. It's the underpinning of creating the rest of this plan. Okay. And I know a lot of questions are coming in. I'm going to get to those questions. I want to finish up showing you the new form here. Okay, now we're on to the post-secondary goals, the element 4 of indicator 13. Within 1 year of graduation, Jody will complete a preparatory course at the community college and obtain the work keys certificate. And you'll see on the blank template, part of this sentence is already written out in terms of within 1 year of graduation, and then you enter the student's name, will, and then what it is. So we're just, again, trying to usher in some of that best practice and to help you be compliant with this indicator, because it needs to be written as an outcome that takes place after graduation. Every now and again, we'll see in this section kind of just like a narrative of how the student is doing, and that's good information, and maybe it might be better underneath the assessment section around the strengths, preferences, and needs. But for this, it really needs to be the post-secondary goal written as an outcome. Okay. And the post-secondary goals, again, cover 3 domains. Education and training and employment are required for all kids. When appropriate, independent living should be in there as well. And if you have an independent living post-secondary goal, then there must be a corresponding annual goal. Okay. And if the team feels that it's not appropriate to have independent living goals, just what we ask at AOE is please just write a little statement that just says something to the effect of the IEP team determined this was not appropriate. It's very helpful for our monitors to see that. Okay, because then it shows us that you did consider that. You guys considered that as an IEP team. So you have education and training post-secondary goals, employment, and independent living. Her employment post-secondary goal is within 1 year of graduation, after obtaining her work key certificate, Jody will obtain and maintain a full-time position in a retail setting for competitive pay. Independent living. Within 1 year of graduation, Jody will live alone or with a roommate independently without live-in monitors in a supported living house or apartment. Now, you could build that out. That could also say within 2 years, or that, on the original sample with the case study, it says 10 years. And I had switched it just because the template has within 1 year. You can change that as long as it's a guidepost for taking place after graduation. And you know what? With education and training, you could even have, for one of your college-bound kids, you could have it be written as an outcome that takes place after they graduate college. Okay, you can push that one out it's dependent on the individual student and the situation and their goals and the results of their assessments. Okay. So now we're on to the annual goals. So we have an annual goal for each of those domains. Okay. By the end of the school year, Jody will correctly read a minimum of 50 words related to community locations or her work, such as those that might be listed in work memos or bus schedules, within 4 seconds of seeing them 3 times in a row. Okay, this is very specific. It's measurable. This is her first annual goal for education and training. Sometimes when we receive IEPs, sometimes we might have some good post-secondary goals, but then the annual goal is like the student is going to attend CTE or something like that. There's no real goal. Like, what are you really measuring? That's great if CTE is sort of the medium for where that student is receiving their instruction. So just dig into that. What's a good goal tied in with their post-secondary goal that you can measure and be tracking throughout the year? Okay. The next section she has for education and training is given a section of text containing known and or decodable words, Jody will read the text and answer at least 3 of 4 comprehension questions correctly 5 times in a row by April 2021. So good annual goals, they're measurable. Progress reviews, write the dates. Okay. Annual goal for employment. When she's working at her job or at school, Jody will practice greeting people and or answering questions and then returning to work without prompting, stop talking, or continue working 100% of the time, 2 weeks in a row by April 2021. Annual goal for independent living. And remember, this is required if there was a post-secondary goal for independent living. If the team decided that independent living was not appropriate and you stated that above in the post-secondary goal, then you really, for this part, you could just put an NA, okay? As long as there is a message up there in that post-secondary goal for independent living, the team decided this was not appropriate, okay? When you leave it just blank, or if it just says NA across the board for that, it's hard for our monitors to really get a sense of, did the IEP team consider this? Did they put thought into, is this an area that our student needs support? Okay. And for annual goal for employment or for independent living, in home economics, consumer math, and in community-based instruction, Jody will determine the unit price of items to choose the better buy independently in 4 to 5 tries, 5 times in a row by April 2021. And then she also has in home ec, consumer math, and in community-based instruction and educational experience, when provided a set amount of money, Jody will use the correct procedures to accurately calculate the tax and total cost of the item with tax to know how much she needs to make her purchase 10 times in a row by April 2021. Okay, so moving on with the new form. Are the post-secondary goals updated annually? Hopefully that's a yes for everybody. Okay, this next section, transition services, is all new. Okay, so this is element 7. We're almost to the end of the elements here, and then we're going to go into another task. So for transition services, it's recommended to also keep this as a cumulative record, just like you do with the assessments. And you want to know why? It's so that you can have a better handle on quantifying access to transition services, okay? Graduation for a student on an IEP is not just about meeting the local graduation requirements, the proficiencies, and or if they're using credits that flow into the proficiencies, however your school is doing it, okay? If that student was on an IEP, it's not just about meeting those credits or meeting those proficiencies, okay? They need to have access. They need to have received access, reasonable and appropriate access to transition services. It's not about whether or not they met the goal. Because sometimes, as you all know, sometimes your kid might not necessarily meet the goal that's like in the annual section, for instance. But you provided the services that to the best of your ability as an LEA for that student to meet the goal. And that's providing the access. By implementing these things and providing these transition services. So let's say Jody didn't totally meet one of her annual goals above. However, the service was offered to her to the best of the LEA's ability. That's all you can do. That's what you're on the hook for, is providing that access. Now, the reason you want this as a running list is so as we get a couple years down the road, if you start this when that kid is 16, and that kid is now, let's say, 19 or 20 and is, maybe has a developmental disability, and the team has decided to continue for another year, okay, and participate in the graduation ceremony, but not graduate and come back focused on transition. In order to make those decisions about when to graduate, this is one of your best ways of quantifying that, along with and you would use the graduation readiness tool, okay? And that is on the secondary transition part of the site, and we're going to get to that. But keep this as a running list. You want to be able to easily look back, what did you offer as an LEA in terms of access to transition? Okay. That's what you're trying to quantify. So when in terms of graduation readiness, you're looking at, of course, the student needs to meet the local graduation requirements, but they need this access and they need a bunch of other things too. That's what's on the readiness tool. It's essentially a checklist. However, I really do think it'll benefit you to be able to look back and see a running list of transition services. Okay. Particularly when you have a family that wants your student to continue for another year or two, even though, let's say the student already has a job, they've had really great access to transition, they've been meeting their transition goals each year, they've had that access, and everything that you're seeing shows that, hey, it might be time for us to really look at graduation. I mean, let's say they continued for a year past their typical peers, but the family is wanting that another year. This is where you start to get into this point of, well, when does developmental services take over? And when are we going to decide how are we drawing that line? And it's subjective. And you need some information to be able to quantify that decision. And looking at the access to transition is one of your best ways of doing that with the readiness tool, along with your, reviewing IEPs as a team. Okay. What you've offered as an LEA each year. Okay. So for transition services for education and training, Jody is going to get transportation support, possibly audio, text, and oral testing to complete the certification exam. The position responsible is the special ed case manager, and there's a start date. Again, this is all new. This is just taking what we had and adding a lot more detail in terms of the documentation. And ideally, when you fill this out completely, the hope is really that it'll naturally be Indicator 13 compliant. Okay. But the main thing is I want you to understand all 8 of these elements. All right. So transition services for employment, school-based, and then community-based job coaching as necessary, visual reminders, regular feedback. Position responsible, employment specialist and or the work-based learning coordinator. Start date, end date. Transition services for independent living, written checklists, self-advocacy coaching, instruction related to budgeting and spending, community living support as needed until her routine is established. Okay. Start date, end date. All right, so that's transition services, and we're now coming into the last section, which is element 8, and that's a description or narrative of coursework necessary to achieve the student's desired post-secondary goals from the current to the anticipated exit year. If the student ever moves, this helps the new school implement appropriate courses. And this is also new. There's a chart here, okay? In this case, Jody's final year is listed here from her current, because this is her last year. So she's got advanced consumer science, family consumer science, consumer math, English 4, community-based vocational experience and work-based learning, and community-based instruction. Okay. So that's the new form. And the next thing I want to get into is that I want everybody to take, well, hold on one second here, folks. What we're going to do now is I'm going to go through the PowerPoint. I'm just checking to see if there's any specific things I need to do right now from, okay. So I'm going to run through the PowerPoint, and then we're going to get into the Indicator 13 suite of tools, okay? And those are the tools that I think are how you're going to be able to be consistently writing Indicator 13 compliant transition plans. And I know I already said it, I want us to become the best state in the country for this. This is important work. And we're also, there's going to be more information coming, but just to whet your appetite a little bit, we're creating a local transition leader program. It's going to be a community of practice. And that is for the special educators that have a really, really strong handle on this, that can be used to increase the local capacity. Okay. A lot more information to come on that. And there is going to be a second part to this training that is all about that community of practice. Okay. So let's run through this PowerPoint. Nobody likes PowerPoint, so I don't want to spend too much time on it, but it does add some additional depth. Okay. And
John,
again,
there are a bunch of questions in the chat.
Yeah, I was going to get to the questions at the end, but I mean, I am going to get into those. So we're going to get to those. Okay. So again, student invitation. There needs to be evidence that the student was invited, and I've shown you the those sections of the new IEP and the old IEP. So we have some examples and we have some non-examples. Outside agencies, needs to be evidence. It's all about the invitation. By the way, this PowerPoint is on, everything that I'm showing you today is up on the secondary transition section of the website. Okay. Examples and non-examples of outside agencies getting invited. There needs to be age-appropriate transition assessments. Covered that. This is the definition of transition assessment, and that's what is in italics in the assessment section of the new form. We talked about this a little bit of this red flag when if there has not been transition assessments completed, but rather a plan to go do them later in the year. The transition plan should be drawing on those finished assessments and collect the information on the students' preferences, needs, and strengths. And I know there's a lot of questions. We're going to get to those. I see them coming in. Assessments, we've really kind of covered this, so I'm going to cruise past this. So remember with the new form, it automatically is asking you to include that summary about what was gleaned. post-secondary goals. So I saw there was a question earlier that came in about post-secondary goals and the fact that they take place after graduation, and how are we on the hook for something that takes place after graduation? You're not on the hook for anything that takes place after graduation. You're on the hook for those annual goals and the transition services that you're providing during the year. The post-secondary goal is designed to be an overarching kind of guidepost that the team is trying to move the student toward. The feds created it. The feds created this entire indicator and all these elements with the hope that if IEP teams and special educators follow these 8 elements, they're going to be most likely to be ushering best around transition planning. Okay. There's no case law that I know of where a school got in trouble because the kid didn't meet the post-secondary goal for whatever reason. Again, the LEA is on the hook for the annual goal and the services. The post-secondary goal should also, of course, it's based on the data that you've collected with the assessments. So it should be realistic. Okay. Occurs after graduation, must be measurable and concrete. It should not use phrases like student may be employed after graduation. Student hopes, these are not measurable. So will or shall. Document the team decision on independent living. So this is one where this little section should be updated in my PowerPoint, but because what we're asking you is, instead of writing NA for the post-secondary goal for independent living, just have a statement there from the IEP team. And then you can write NA where the annual goal is, if there's not going to be a post-secondary goal for independent living. When the post-secondary transition plan goal for employment seeks to document is the eventual career goal of the student. It's not a goal for the part-time work a student might be seeking while they're still in school, which would be highly appropriate to be tying in with your annual goal. The post-secondary goal is a guidepost for what the student hopes to achieve after they graduate. It can take place immediately after high school or even after college. Okay, so we've got some examples and non-examples. We've got our annual goals for employment. Again, this is what they're working on the current year. I'm going to start to move a little faster through this because we've covered a lot of this, and there's a lot more I want to get to. The post-secondary goals need to be updated annually. There needs to be transition services that support that student to meet their IEP goal. Course of study. Again, it's from the current year to the anticipated exit or graduation. The primary courses that the team feels are most critical for helping that kid meet their post-secondary goals. So where I want to go back to is this page. And I think it might make sense to dip into some of these questions now. I suspect that it sounds like there's a lot of them. So I'm scrolling up. I'm going to address some of the questions. And then we're going to get into the Indicator 13 suite of tools that is set up for you guys. Okay. All right, I'm scrolling up. Voc Rehab is an optional post-high school service. What should be done when parents and students refuse to engage with VR or outside agencies? Okay. So again, if that's the case and the student and the family is refusing, you're not going to be on the hook. You're not going to get dinged for that, but you have to document it in that section and just say the student and the family have refused VR services. Okay. Just state that right in that section where there evidence of inviting outside agencies. You're not going to get dinged for that. That you're not on. You can't control that. So, but if you are, because what you're doing, remember, element 2, show evidence that you are trying to pull in these outside agencies. And if you've clearly done that because the parents have refused it, and you're stating that. Okay. In that, so real quick on that one though, I want to show you Voc Rehab has this. Voc Rehab contacts by school. If you don't know who your transition counselor is, you can find them. And if the student and the family is really refusing it, I mean, it might be worth leaning into that a little bit and at least what is that based on? Do they understand what Voc Rehab is potentially going to do? And, again, they are kind of a lifeline in a way because when they leave your school, they're done. Their entitlements to services that you're providing are over. And by getting them connected with VR, you're helping them. So it's unfortunate that, if the family just is refusing that. So,
John, just to clarify, John, if I may, on my question or about that was just that these aren't typically the kids that are like intensive service type students that are refusing. It's more about the kids that are more in the higher functioning. They don't see that Voc Rehab or and DS is definitely not a service that they would qualify for. That it is below their ability needs for post high school, and so they don't see the need for those kinds of agencies involved in their children's or their young adults' lives.
Okay, so you would just state that in that section, and that will cover you in terms of the indicator 13. So good questions. Good questions. All right. I encourage involvement to VR. Okay, I'm just going through the chat here. John, do we have to do transition assessments each year if the goals have not changed? Good question. That brings us to a nice segue. And I'm going to get to the rest of those questions after, because you know what? We're going to go right into the assessment planning form. So when you were on the secondary transition section of the website, I want to draw your attention to this tool, the transition assessment planning form. This is ground zero. This is when you first start planning and convening the initial meeting before, like when you're first starting to pull this together, this is the tool that you want to start with. Okay. And so this is a planning tool for your team, and it's broken down by the transition assessment domains. It has areas of assessment to consider. And then you fill this out as a team. What do we already know? What do we need to learn? How will we gather this? Who is going to gather it and when? Okay. Now each year you can review this form each year. And if the team feels like you've already done a handful of formal and informal transition assessments and you have a lot of good data, then you may decide that you don't need to do another transition assessment. However, with another kid, maybe there's some new skill area that they have expressed interest or some type of trade or some new information that has come onto the scene that you guys want to do another assessment for. I would encourage you to pull this up as a team, decide if you are going to be adding any additional assessments for that following year, and then decide how you're going to get it done. So there's current and future employment, education and training, and independent living. Okay, these are all to help you gather and stay organized with what you're doing around assessments. The other document I want to bring your attention to that's relevant right now is this document, Implementing Transition Services During Remote Learning. Now, with a lot of students kind of coming back to more full-time, but your school may still be doing a hybrid. It's a little bit of a mix all around the state, right? So this document, I put this together not long after COVID had hit, and I was looking at what other states are doing, and this is a way for special educators to essentially meet FAPE around transition if the student's in a remote learning environment. However, the reason I'm really pointing your attention to it is that it's heavy on the transition assessments. Okay, so these are all assessments that the student can be doing on their own or with a teacher, and each of these assessments is going to it has sort of a spit out or a printout or a report out, I guess, of what it's gleaning around the students' strengths, needs, and preferences. So take a look at that. If you are needing to draw from some more assessments, this is a great little pool of resources here. And then the other aspect to this is these are ways that the student can be exploring and doing career exploration tied into their goals. Okay, and these are some other websites these are all student friendly for the most part here. Okay, and then the other assessment tool that I wanted to point your attention to is this, the assessment toolkit. So your school, you may already know that your school has a list of assessments that you can draw from, but maybe you want to be pulling in something else. I mean, there's just so much information out there around assessments. I just would recommend taking a look at this, and it goes into the different kinds of assessments. Why do we do it? What are they? All the different types. Okay. All right, I'm going to come back to the chat, answer a few questions, and then we're going to get into there's one more task that you guys are going to be doing. So let's see here. If they cannot come, do they need to be excused by the form with parent signature? So I'm assuming that means if the student can't come. If the student can't come, or the IEP team feels that they don't want, that it's not maybe appropriate for the student to come based on whatever detail, or then you would want to say that. Again, element one is there evidence that you're inviting the kid? Is there evidence that as a team you're thinking about how to pull them in and keep them involved? You just have to state that. Okay.
I think that was actually written when we were talking about voc rehab coming, or outside agencies coming.
So yeah, if voc rehab cannot come, you would say that in that section for element 2, voc rehab was invited but are not able to come at this time. They are going to try to come to the next meeting, or they're going to be starting to come next year, or whatever they tell you. All right. Is there a reason the annual goals are listed separate from the post-secondary goals? Yes, because the post-secondary goal is one that might be in effect for a few years. Whereas the annual goals are updated every year, just like you do in the regular annual section of the IEP. Are we able to have broad goals for each area without objectives? So if Tom, hey Tom, how you doing? So with the annual goals for transition, you can have just one big measurable annual goal that's what you're working on that year to move that kid towards that post-secondary goal. You may have another kid, you may have some objectives for another student, but that's really kind of a team decision there. So if you can achieve what you're trying to do with one main measurable annual goal, great. Next question, when are the goals worked on and assessed? So that's really more of, based on that student's logistical schedule and the services, the special educator services that they're going to be getting. That's going to be vary by student. Next one, I have a student who refuses access. So that's always a tough one. So if you have a kid that's really not available for learning for whatever reason, there's no good answer on that one. You gotta have to kind of do your best to, invite the student. And then if they refuse, you could say the student was invited but refused. Parent refused voc rehab, or the student refused voc rehab. And so you're stating that. I would try to do a little bit of digging. Maybe there's one of those assessments that's student-led transition assessments. Maybe you can kind of hook them into doing something with that, tie it into, you're trying to tap into their interests. So if they're refusing, if you can kind of hook them in with that student interest and, the interests, preferences, and strengths. And again, that's a tough one though. So I understand what you're saying, and there's no easy answer on that one. How does the state factor current workloads of special educators when developing these new requirements? Well, trust me, I know how busy you guys are. I know how much paperwork you have. It's crazy, and I wish it wasn't that way. This transition planning indicator, this is all created by the feds, and that in Vermont, we've tried to streamline this with our new form to make sure that it's just easier to be in compliance for this one. And I do think that we can be, I think that we can do really well on this one. All right, it's my experience that the idea of transition assessments is not well respected by alternative non-LEA based day programs and residential programs. How can I help these programs offer the assessments and help in the creation of the information needed for the Indicator 13 paperwork? Okay, great question, Catherine. First off, those non-LEA based programs, you as an LEA, you're typically funding those. Your student is going there, you're paying for that student to go. They're working for you. They're an extension of what you're providing, and that's how you're providing FAPE, because in that case, maybe that is the least restrictive environment for that kid, right? So they work for you. They're supporting you and your student, and they really should. If there are assessments that they're not doing, yeah, that's gonna just. I think you're just gonna have to talk with them about that and try to get on the same page with them. And I think what we might need to do, and we can certainly do this, is do some more trainings with independent schools and alternative programs. If there are particular alternative programs that you guys have in mind that are really kind of been balking at this, would you mind shooting me an email and I can start to collect the names of the schools? And there, again, I won't come back to anybody. I just want to know what schools it is, and then maybe we can offer a training as well. And certainly, I suspect we have some special educators from independent schools and alternative schools here too. And of course, always everyone's welcome, but it might make sense to do a specific target on some of those schools. Okay, one of the questions, are Joni's courses, but I think you mean Jody, are Jody's courses general ed or special ed courses? So in that case, she's at a fictional high school, Happy Valley High School. I believe most of those courses are general ed. Can you address the questions prior to move on? When will the state provide time for us to disseminate this process in order to effectively be the best state? So basically, for all of the LEAs that are in the monitoring cycle this year, you guys have until March to get your new transition plans done on the new forms. Okay, so you have until March. If a student and family are adamant against going to college, is it okay to just talk about only future training, possibly through developmental services or voc rehab in the education section? Okay, great question. So for education and training, if you have a student that certainly does not want to go to college, or maybe the team just feels it wouldn't be appropriate, but also keep in mind though that we have a lot of new initiatives for students with intensive needs, like College Steps and Think College, the Succeed program. So we do have more options than we used to have. However, if the family is saying, hey, the student is saying, I don't want to go to college. So the education and training section can be tied into what kind of training. So if they want to go right into work in that case, what kind of education and training do they need to further their job and their career? That's an area you could tie in with the education and training section. And then for your kids who, have really intensive needs and the student and the family are not interested in college, but that they're going to be eligible for developmental services, the education and training post-secondary goal can be more tied in with community integration, communication, things that are going to help that student do well in the community. And if you want to look at the case study project has 6 fictional students. Each of those case study projects, there's a transition plan that is indicator 13 compliant. It's on the old forms though, remember? But we have a student in there named Kevin who has multiple disabilities and medically fragile, and it shows what his transition plan looks like. Each of those 6 cases has a variety of different kinds of students. So when you click the case study project, it'll give you a little blurb for each student. And the reason we made that is so that people can start to see the relationship between the PLP, the personalized learning plan, the general ed side of this, and then the transition plan and the IEP. Is there a list of assessments that the AOE recommends? Is it possible to compile this? So Megan, the resource that I just showed, there is a couple lists. There's the list from the document I was just showing around implementing transition during remote learning that has a lot of assessments on it. And then you have the big NTACT assessment guide, okay? And that lists out a lot of different kinds of assessments. We don't have kind of an AOE, here's the top 10 or something like that, because it is very much individually determined. One assessment for one kid might not be appropriate for another kid. So that's why we don't really have a set like top 10 list or something. Are all these forms already on the AOE site? We are not finding them. Yes, and you know what, Laura, let's do a quick, I'm gonna go back because it sounded like I went too fast. I'm gonna go to Google. Okay, so I'm on Google. I'm just gonna type in Vermont AOE what? Okay, I'm gonna click this. And then Laura, right here on this page, it has resources for special educators and administrators. Hopefully everybody can see that. And then you're going to click that. And then you got to scroll. See, I wish I had my own little section on here, but I don't. I got to scroll. And here it is. So Laura, everything I've showed you guys today is on here. And the next chunk of time here, I want to get through a few more questions, but we're going to go into this suite of tools here. Okay. I'm going to come back to the chat though.
John.
Yeah.
I want to bring out one question that was asked, because you did say the deadline was March for some of the districts. So if we have until March to get the transition forms done, is that for all students who are eligible, total revision or annual revision as they are due?
So my understanding, hold on, I'm going to read it directly from Tanya. Hold on, folks. Give me one sec here. All right. Bear with me. All right. Now I can't find it. Bear with me, folks.
John, do you need the deadline for?
Yeah, Simona, there you go. Can you chime in on that one?
March 15 is the deadline for indicator 13 for turning in basically the corrected IEPs from the monitoring cycle that just ended. And all of you should have by now received the list of what those perm numbers associated with the IEPs that need to be corrected are. Just as a reminder, it was already in your records. It was just for your convenience. Plus 10 more transition plans of your choice, what we call prong 2, to make sure that any problem with indicator 13 was not systemic. So you correct the IEPs that you had turned in this, just finished the monitoring cycle, correct those, plus 10. I hope I answered the question. Do you think, John, is that what they were asking?
Yes, I think so. And so, Simona, they don't need to go through and redo all of them. It's just for those 10 and the...
Well, we're talking about two groups. If they turned in this year that just ended, this monitoring cycle, if they turned in transition plans that were not compliant, only those need to be corrected. But in addition to those, they will need to turn in 10 more transition plans to make sure that there are no systemic problems. So it's going to be, for sure, 10 transition plans, plus however many, if any, were not compliant. And probably there were, otherwise they wouldn't be in selective monitoring. So those who are in selective monitoring for indicator 13 need to turn in 10 transition plans of their choice, plus correct those that were not compliant this year.
In addition, the information was sent to the directors, not the special educators as of yet on some districts.
Okay, well, the idea yesterday was that they would all go out to the special educators and not to the directors as per a new set of instructions that was communicated to us. So if you did not receive that list of IPs that needs to be corrected, let me know. However, the list doesn't tell you anything new. It's just for your convenience, a grouping basically in one document of the IPs that you need to correct. Because of course there might be also other indicators that you need to correct, and we try to make your life easier by sending the list. So if you haven't received it, let us know and we'll make sure that you get it.
Tate, you had a question. Tate, do you want to ask your question?
Thank you, John, for this great training. What if we have students who've graduated? Are we really going back and retroactively changing a document for a student who's...
No, just let us know the PERM numbers of the students who graduated. And then basically you will need to correct only those that are left, if there are any left, plus the 10. Actually, Tanya was telling me it's 10 plus however many graduated. So say 3 of your students graduated, right? You'd give us the PERM numbers. And this was a new directive I just learned. You would have to turn in with the 10 additional, you would have to turn in 3 more. But in any case, just send us the PERM numbers of the students who graduated. You don't need to do anything about those.
Thank you, Simona, so much. Melissa Starr, you had a question?
Yeah, so I'm wondering if we've done a PBGR access plan and we've filled out a course of study. And the course of study would, in our instance, document proficiencies versus courses and classes that the kids need to accomplish. So I'm just wondering, how does that dovetail with the PBGR access plan? Does it at all, or how?
So yeah, the PBGR access plan, and there is going to be more training coming out on that, but that's really looking at, accessing the local graduation requirements. So that, when you look at like the graduation readiness tool, and it's asking you, did the student meet the local graduation requirements? And if your kid was historically on a multi-year plan and needed some of that alternative credit accrual systems, and now they're doing the PBGR access plan, that's really just about, meeting the local grad requirements. It's sort of one item in the whole sort of transition checklist, if you will. So they're related, but they're kind of their own entities. All right, so we got a couple more. We have people asking questions, and I've got some more questions in the chat, and I have a couple things I want to show you. So if you have a question still, keep your hands raised. I'm going to just try to get through a few more of these questions in the chat. So there's a couple people are asking, where is the presentation on the website? So the PowerPoint is right here in the secondary transition section of the website. Remember how we got there? And if you scroll down to, it just says post-secondary transition planning presentation 2020. That's the PowerPoint. Okay. Let's see here. Okay, people posted the links. Would you mind talking more about how the annual IEP goals should be corresponding with the transition goals? That's a good question. I mean, that's going to be case by case and individually tied, based on the student. However, particularly as that student gets older and as the focus becomes more and more on transition, what are we going to do to help this kid be ready for life after high school? So of course they have their transition plan, but they also have this annual goal section So I guess I would be saying, you know, what can you do? Are there ways to be tying that, making those goals? You know, if it's again based on the student, how, you know, I would be kind of putting it back on the IEP team a little bit. Are there ways to further increase the connection between the annual section and to be asking yourselves that, and how those two are staying connected. And also, sometimes people like to put the annual transition goal in the annual section versus put it in the transition plan. We recommending having the transition goal right in the transition plan so the whole team can see the post-secondary goal, and then here's the annual transition goal. Can you add me to the attendance list? Okay. Okay. Yes. Some of the links go to sites that don't. I'll check those links. That's interesting. All right, folks, I just want to make sure we have enough time. So I'm going to pause on the chat. Why don't we knock out the questions that people have that have raised their hands? So Joe, you had another question?
Yes, I did. Thank you. So one I put in the chat so you can skip it, but just if we're having to update the transition plan and we've already held, let's say, the annual IEP meeting. I mean, typically if we do any adjustments, we have to do an amendment revision. Can we just do the transition plan as its own update?
Simona, would you mind taking that one?
I can take it in the sense that I will turn it to higher ups and let you know. Okay. So
right.
Whether or not you can change the IEP as a standalone without it doing an actual amendment. Okay. I will have to let you know on that one.
Just because it's being pushed through as a new form, yeah. And then real quick, someone was talking about multi-year plans and the access plans. I have heard that some districts are still using multi-year plans, and my understanding is that isn't an option anymore. Is there any clarity on that? Are we allowed to grandfather kids through, or what is happening with that? Well, I know it's unrelated, so I apologize.
Yeah, I mean, if the school should be completely switched over now to using proficiencies to determine graduation. So if that's the case, the PBGR access plan is how you would sort of manifest what you used to manifest when it was a credit bearing system. So if the school is still using credits somehow, and then those are tied into proficiencies, there's nothing that, if your school is still using credits, then the multi-year plan then is all you can really do. And if you're fully switched over to PBGRs, which you should be, then the access plan is what you'd want to use.
Okay, thank you.
Tate, did you have another question? You have your hand raised.
I don't believe so.
Okay, Andrea Cook, you have your hand raised.
So back to the March deadline of revising or fixing the transition plans. If we have already completed a IEP for a student for this school year and the kid is graduating in June, or even just the IEP has already been completed for the year, do we go back and put that into
Yeah, I think that's a similar question to whether or not you need to have an amendment first, and that's going to be a follow-up item. And it's also, folks, if we somehow can't get to all the chat questions, we have all of your emails now, and there's going to be a couple follow-up items on this, and there's going to be a follow-up training as well. So Okay, the next thing I really want to make sure I have time to show you guys is back on the secondary transition resource page, the Indicator 13 suite of tools. I want you to take a look at these two documents right here. So the Vermont Indicator 13 checklist, there's a self-assessment for special educators. I recommend that you print this out and have a bunch of copies, just have it ready for any time you're writing a transition plan. That it's just a simple one-page doc that you can be referencing. Element 1, is there evidence that the student was invited? Element 2, is there evidence that outside agencies were invited, etc.? All the elements that we've discussed, and you can be self-monitoring. Okay. And then the other item that's related to this is a new form that we drew from. I created this from several other states, as well as kind of what a lot of the questions that were happening here. And this is an in-depth guide to using that checklist. So the first two sections are pretty self-explanatory, but where it starts to get, there's more guidance on some of these, like the assessment section. And this is all new. That whole suite is all new. So in terms of, for the directors listening, I mean, I would be, print off the special educator, the self-assessment checklist, and then this is like the TA sheet. This is called the Indicator 13 technical assistance sheet. And it's just going to give you some more background on using that checklist. Let's just take a look here. So for post-secondary goals, is there an appropriate post-secondary goal for education and training, for employment, and where appropriate, independent living? It's element 4. Okay, and there's just additional guidance here, what we've talked about around writing it as an outcome. Are there goals related to the student's transition services needs? Again, just it's more depth and background to that checklist. Okay. All right, now I'm going to come back. I want to grab any other questions in the chat that we haven't got to. Let's see here. Richard Smith said that the new form will be in DocuSped by the end of the week or shortly thereafter. Are there any schools in the state that are providing transition services in a well-organized manner? If so, are you able to share what schools? I'd be interested to consult with them around this work. So Allison, that's a good question, and it's tied into the second part of the follow-up to this training, which is we're going to try to build a community of practice and create local transition leaders. So more to come on that, but right now I don't necessarily have a list of which schools are doing it really well, because the thing is, every school often, I mean, you have a mix from what we've seen. So, you have schools where there's a couple special educators that really know this stuff, and then there's some that aren't as fresh with it, and we see that a lot. But it is a really good question, Allison, and it's something that I really want to make sure we do, which is just building out that local capacity so that schools not only have a really strong local leader in their district to help with this, but sure, also can be networking with another district that's now doing this really well. So more to come on this, but right now, no, I don't have necessarily a handy, like, okay, here's the top 5 or something, but I want to be able to have that. So there's some things that we're still doing here.
John?
Yeah.
Regarding those amendments to transition plans, they need to go through an actual process of amendment to fix them.
Okay. Andrea, does that answer your question?
The general question was about going back and changing or fixing the ones that we have already done for the year. It wasn't about really technically revisions, but just fixing those.
Okay. I think the answer wouldn't change in the sense that if they are done,
Right.
then they need to be, amended as if any change were to occur between regular. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, thanks, Simona.
Sure thing.
All right, let's see here. Something to keep in mind, can you also add speech and language pathologists? We also case manage students and are writing up transition plans. Oh yeah, that's good, Caitlin, thank you. Yeah, and so do you mean in terms of like making sure that those folks are invited? Yes, that's a good point. Okay. Define compliant. Oh, let me back up. Are all districts being monitored on indicator 13 this year? Simona?
Yeah, all districts that were in the previous monitoring cycle, 2019, 2020, are back into monitoring this year as selective monitoring. So typically just indicator 13 or whatever other indicator they were not compliant about. Indicator 13 apply to all of those in the current monitoring cycle. In addition, then, of course, for cyclic monitoring, we are monitoring all the districts in this year's current monitoring. That was a lot of current monitoring. I hope it wasn't confusing. So all the districts in this year's monitoring cycle are monitored for everything in the cycle, including indicator 13. Plus, we are selectively monitoring for indicator 13 those that were in the previous monitoring cycle.
Okay, thank you. Linda, you have your hand raised?
Yes, I know that they talked about SpedDoc having this information in the system. We use GoView, and I don't know, has GoView been contacted to get this information in?
So that's going to be a follow-up one on as far as GoalView. I don't the way the forms are with all the systems in place, like, yeah, that's going to be a follow-up. So I don't have an answer yet on when it'll be in GoView, but hopefully soon, of course. So I just don't know the status of that because the forms are kind of like, once I get, the forms are kind of organized and have different folks involved. And so anyway, I will follow up on that one.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay, let's see. Define compliant, assuming that the old form was compliant. Do they need to be corrected? So yeah, I mean, the old form, it's not that the form was compliant or not compliant. It's actually the input, it's like what the plan was. So the old form was a little loose in terms of making it easier to be compliant. The new form is aiming to, really give you guys a little more guidance so that it's easier to fall into a compliant plan. Let's see. The scroller thing on this is a little funky. All right, I'm going to try to get through these questions. Core transition teams are a good place to start, are a good place for local support and resource sharing relating to transition planning. And yeah, we haven't really talked much about core teams, but of course, some of you were probably at our fall core conference last week and when we have part 2 next week. So your core transition teams are really your local interagency kind of problem-solving entity for transition. So it's bigger than Indicator 13 in a way, because it's really all of the pieces locally. You have all sorts of different folks that sit on that team. But yes, it's certainly a wealth of information and support. And I highly recommend everybody participate in their core team. And if you don't know who your core team is, or you don't know who your voc rehab counselor is, you want to take a look at that sheet, that page on the voc rehab site that I was showing that shows the counselors by state. And if you can't remember how to find that, just Google Vermont transition counselors by school, and you should get right to that page. It's an A to Z guide there. Can you please share again why we are focusing on this indicator this year? Is this focus just to align the state's practices with the federal guidelines? The reason is that the feds have said, hey, Vermont, you're not doing well with this, and you guys need assistance. And I was like, I mean, I'm not happy about it. And because I know a lot of the work that's happening is really good work that you guys are doing with students. And it's really, there's a documentation part of this that is a big hang up for a lot of folks in terms of how you document it. Okay. And I think as you guys just start to get more familiar with that process, we're not going to be in a place of needing assistance from the feds. And again, I want us to become the best state in the country for this. And I think it's totally doable. Let's see. Just to clarify, you only need to meet the March deadline if you are being monitored. Otherwise, can these be changed as we do annual IEPs? Yes, is my understanding on that. Simona, if I'm misspeaking, just chime in.
As far as monitoring goes, the list of districts we have is what we are going to monitor. So that's, as far as monitoring goes, if you're not in any list, you're good.
Thanks.
Yep.
All right. I'm just trying to scroll through these. The chat here. The chat thing just won't scroll down very well. Sorry, folks. I know we're just about over time here. Cindy, how do we know what schools are on that list? The directors, ask your SPED director.
On the website, in special education, under student services and then special education is the list. If you want, I can try and drop it in the chat.
Sure. So folks, I don't want to take up any more of your time. This training is supposed to end at noon. I'm going to go through the rest of the chat, and if there are any outstanding questions, and there were a few obviously that have come up, we're gonna put those into a follow-up email to all of you, and also stay tuned for an email about the Part 2 training around this with more information around the local transition leaders program. Tom O'Toole, how you doing? You want to ask something? Go ahead, Tom. You're probably muted.
No, I was messing around with the controls. I was going to send a chat and ask you what your favorite Grateful Dead show was, but I couldn't find the chat, so then I didn't mean to raise my hand.
Highgate.
Awesome. Okay.
Yeah, buddy. Jeremy?
I'm sorry to belabor this. I just want to get absolute clarity. So if you are not a school that's being monitored, then the new transition template that's being going to be put into DocuSped and other platforms, you don't need to go back and revise transition plans that you've already done for this year, correct? You're just going to use that new template as those new transition plans become due.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. So folks, this training was recorded.
John, just one last plug. If people have monitoring questions, I'd like to remind everyone that on the 29th, I think it's between 9 and 11, we have a training for specifically for monitoring. So all of you should have already received an invitation. So if anything has remained unanswered, we're always available, but there will also be that session 9 to 11 on Thursday, October the 29th. Sorry for the interruption.
No, that's awesome, Simona. Thank you. So folks, I'd like to just wrap this up here. And I really appreciate your time and you guys attending. And, don't hesitate to reach out over email if you need something. And again, stay tuned for some follow-up things after this.
Could a link be sent out about that transition training? She was just speaking about the monitoring training. Can you send a link out on that?
I think she just posted it. It's take a look in the chat right now. She just
Perfect. Thanks.
I know I haven't posted it yet, but I will also check with Sabina if where the invite should come from. But we'll get that straightened out momentarily.
Thanks.
I'm here. I added it to the chat, and then we'll also add it to the notes if we can. And
thank you, Sabina.
Okay, thank you, everybody. This convenes our training. Thanks for joining us. Have a great day, everybody. Take care.